that could hold a human being, but could God have fashioned a gigantic catfish? Maybe, but that's just, it's just kind of trying to give the impression as to what the writer meant. Now, remember this also. Quoting the Bible is not all about quoting it verbatim. And we know that because in the New Testament, when they're quoting the Old Testament, oftentimes they're not quoting it in verbatim. And sometimes they are, as a matter of fact, most times, I think about between 75 to 80% of the time, they are quoting not the Hebrew Old Testament, but they're quoting the Septuagint, where if you're going to quote the Septuagint, well, then you're certainly not quoting it verbatim. What you're doing is you're getting the idea. And so when we have a translation, we have either the literal translation, the word for word, or the thought for thought. The problem is neither of those are enough. When you hear me say something, you need the words, but then you also need the thought behind it. And the way I kind of describe this is if I say the word really. So you say something to me and I say, really, or I say, really, or really. So I can say really so many different ways, but when you write it down, you can write down what I said. The only problem is you can't, when you write that down, you're not getting my tone. One really was me saying it sarcastically. One of it was, I'm really interested. Yeah, really. One of them just, I don't care. So just like, and I've seen people do this. You could just use the word all right to say a lot of different things. All right, that'd be your introduction. All right, you leaving. All right, then that's me getting rid of you. So so when you try to translate a text, you're trying to get the words and the thought. The problem is we've got word for word translations and we got thought for thought translations. We really need both of them to be kind of melded together. But even still, if you meld them together, you don't get a word for word translation because you cannot. It's next to impossible to have a word for word translation from the Greek or from the Hebrew. But you can do your very best. The problem is sometimes you miss out on what it's saying. And so, for example, one of the examples that I use often is this text, because you can't use this. You can't use the word for word translation of this. And you all have seen me use this before. This is Proverbs. Is it 26:2? I think. Nope. What is it? 20. What text is this? Is it 22:6? I keep forgetting. I think it's 22:6. There it is. So here's the problem when you use this particular text. By the way, this software update it gives me like a 2 or 3 second delay when I push the button to bring it up. But in the English, it says, train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. But the Greek does not say train a child in the way that he should go. It starts off by saying train a child, but then it says al pi derko. So the word for word translation will be train a child upon the mouth of, or on the mouth of his way. Well, that's weird. If we translate that word for word, train a child on the mouth of his way. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's a Hebrew idiom. So now you got a problem. How do you take and translate or move the Hebrew idiom and give it word for word and hope that people are going to understand it? Because we're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 years after the fact. And so this idiom is not the same idiom today. We won't look at it the same way. We won't see it the same way. We have idioms today and we don't think of them, but just figures of speech that in 1,000 years or 100 years or 50 years, people will not have any understanding of what that means. When we were growing up, somebody might have said rad or gnarly, or that's boss, right? Well, what's that mean now? Even today, there are idioms, there are figures of speech people might use, and I'm out of the loop. Took me a while to get what do they say? Cap? That's cap. Took me a while to catch on to that. That's just how language works. And so your goal is when you take a word,